You are listening to the sounds of the Right On Network.
Hello and welcome to episode 7 of On the Record Jams, brought to you by the Right On Network. I'm AJ and along with me is Arthur. Hello, Arthur.
Hello, AJ. We're back again. Can you believe after we come out with our episode, like we inspired Kendrick Lamar to put out an album, a secret, top secret, nobody knew it was coming album. I think it was us. I'm taking credit for it. That's all it is to it.
Take credit for it because we pushed those algorithms. We pushed the AI. We pushed the, just the cosmos forward and made that happen.
I'm glad too. It's a good album.
So Kendrick Lamar came out with an album after we talked about one of his songs and, his career. Now we're back. There's a lot of track 7s that I've liked on albums before. I like Weezer's Say It Ain't So. It's a number of them. I can go into it maybe as the show goes on, but a number of track 7s that I've enjoyed over the years. Sometimes probably it would be the second song on the B-side of a disc, a 12-inch, right? But on this one, I'm going to submit something to the record. This wasn't the 7th song on the album. It's the 5th song. So probably if you got this on vinyl, it would be the ending of side A. This artist is from the island of Manhattan. Fiona Apple, her song Paper Bag from the album When the Pond, and then there's a poem afterwards. It came out in 1999. This song was actually a single, and it came out in June 2000. Paper Bag. You ever heard of Fiona Apple, Arthur?
Of course. I mean, I know because of Criminal, right? You turned on the TV back when this crazy concept would be you would turn on the TV, and there was 2 or 3 channels that played music videos. And so then you would just see a smattering of different videos. And that's if some kind of way they made that short list. If you watch videos, you were going to see it. And that's how I knew who Fiona Apple was back then.
Yeah. So this song earned Fiona Apple Paper Bag a Grammy Award nomination. So, yeah, like you were saying, it's the 90s. They're playing videos, and you say you turn on TV and they're playing Criminal. And I remember kind of like, oh, this is interesting, but also like, what's going on? Like, what are they doing? So I've never heard that first album. And I even thought the artist was interesting. I just never listened to it. And I remember one time, it was in the 90s, and I was talking to Virgil, this kid that lived down the road from you. And I said, hey, have you ever heard of Fiona Apple? And he said, oh, that little white girl with a whole lot of heart. And I remember even thinking like at 16, 17 years old, I was like, yeah, I think that's an apt description. She's a little white girl with a whole lot of heart. So when it comes to the second album, I remember the first single. I swear, I think it was even a commercial for the album. And it was Fast As You Can. And it's the video. And it's kind of like, I don't know anything about music, like as far as describe it. But it was like kind of off kilter, off beat. It was kind of jazzy. It was all this stuff going on. And I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. Because I think with the first album, I think I even maybe like, oh, this is a cool song. But I never inquired further. But with that Fast As You Can, how it was kind of off, I was like, oh, this sounds like it has personality. And then I heard the rest of the album. Now, I remember like Fiona Apple, I think with the first album, she won some type of MTV Music Award. And she got up there and she was saying like, hey, this world is BS. You shouldn't be worried about how we're dressed. Just be yourself. One of them kind of things. Yep. And it's kind of one of those things where like, we've seen so much crazy stuff, you would kind of think like, that was nothing. But that could be something that can get you blacklisted. Like, can get you like, you know what, you did that. So when you try to come out with music, we won't play it, or will kind of suppress you or whatever. But I just remember like that was like a big deal that she did that, and I was kind of like, all right, that seemed like a nothing burger to me. You remember that moment?
I don't remember that moment, but I do remember the era where it was really, there was some power players that could pull you out of the game whenever they wanted to if you stepped out of line, right? Or didn't step into the right whatever they wanted you to step into. Like they had slots for you and you needed to stay in your slot. So I remember that for sure.
Yeah, because with the artist, you say so all the time. She talked about how like a record station were like, well, hey man, we're already playing one woman during our block. We can't play two. So we're still kind of in that time. So I know like when Fiona Apple did that, she was kind of labeled like, she's a nasty girl, troublemaker, not really playing by the rules, right?
Right.
So it's like, ooh. So when she came out with that, and this is during a time too where like a lot of stuff's coming out. So like if someone never returned, you wouldn't have been surprised. So when the second album came out, I remember thinking like, man, this sounds good. But I think I also may have thought we might not hear from her again because her second album, I've said this before, the world doesn't deserve it. And there's sometimes where I'm not brave enough to listen to it. Now we're in 2024. I'm 45 years old. I can listen to it without kind of wincing. Like, ooh, I know there's going to be some gut punches in this. But now I'm just like, nah, you know what? I can take it. I can hold her mess. I can hold my mess. We can get this done. So I sent you a live version of this song, Brown Paper Bag. So when I said, hey, man, I'm going to do this for On the Record Jams, and you listened to it, what were your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it validated my best case scenario of what I thought of her. And you can imagine I'm a sucker for the type of artist that she is, even though I can appreciate that it takes a lot to give of yourself pretty much in any universe, but certainly in that artist world where even if people take a liking to you, they take a liking to your sacrifice. And then it's kind of like what we've talked about in some prior episodes where some of these artists that do these sacrificial albums, they'll get to the point where they're like, hey, can I just come out with some jams now? Like I've hurt myself trying to relive things to put it in the music. Can I just say shake your booty, y'all, for 45 minutes on the next album? And depending on the type of artist or the person you are, generally the public that likes your work, they want you to keep doing what you've been doing, but not so much that it's obvious that that's all you're doing. So you got to play with the sounds. You got to do some things to jazz up what you're doing, even if you're giving a lot of yourself, which makes it even harder. So she's one of these artists that you see the gaps in her discography, right? Like it's going to be 4 or 5, maybe even more years in between times where she gets albums out. And so I thought about all of that listening to these songs. I watched the video, and when you sent me the live thing, I was like, okay, yeah, she killed it live too. And I'm like, yeah, it makes perfect sense that she couldn't just like get 10 or 15 of these out over the last 20 years. Like these songs, these albums, like she's all in on these things. So that gap makes sense to me, if what I'm saying makes sense.
Oh, it makes total sense. And when you hear this live version, she did it on the Today Show, probably in the year 2000. At the very end, she says, "Happy birthday, Daddy." So I'm just going to bring this up since, she mentioned it. So her father is Brandon Maggard, and I know him, and a lot of people, they would know him because he's an actor and he would be in a bunch of stuff. But I knew him from a show on Showtime called Brothers. And it was about these 3 brothers, and they ran a bar together. And this was during a time where like not a lot of people had Showtime, and a lot of people wouldn't have seen this. But now we know about prestige television and cable television have all these prestigious shows. This was during a time where that wasn't really a thing, like cable being known for their original programming. So HBO had First and 10, The Bulls Mean Business, and Showtime, they had this show called Brothers that came out in the early 80s. So that's how I knew them. And then like when you're a TV junkie back then, you would have just seen them pop up in all kind of things. So this is Fiona Apple. And, you know, she's known for playing the piano. She's a piano woman. She's also known for her lyrics. I guess you could say like a lot of times she's jazzy, that whole kind of thing. So I like this song too because she's being vulnerable and she's being self-reflective and she's also taking shots too, if I'm even interpreting this correctly. I don't know. So it goes, I was staring at the sky just looking for a star to pray on or wish on or something like that. I like how it's not defined. Like, you know, when you're just out there doing stuff, you know, you just kind of like it's conversational.
Yep.
Where like a lot of times when you listen to the lyrics, it's like direct and I know what I'm trying to get across to you, right? I was having a sweet fix of a daydream of a boy whose reality I knew was a hopeless to be had. But then the dove of hope began its downward slope, and I believed for a moment that my chances were approaching to be grabbed. But as it came down near, so did a weary tear. I thought it was a bird, but it was just a paper bag. So, and it's I mean, it really grabs you where she goes, the dove of hope. But then it just turned out to be like, oh, it wasn't what I expected at all. Hunger hurts, and I want him so bad, oh, it kills. Because I know I'm a mess he don't want to clean up. I got to fold because these hands are too shaky to hold. Hunger hurts, but starving works when it costs too much to love. Wow. And I went crazy again today, looking for a strand to climb. Looking for a strand to climb. Wow. Looking for a little hope. Baby said he couldn't stay, wouldn't put his lips to mine. A fail to kiss is a fail to cope. I said, honey, I don't feel so good. Don't feel justified. Come on, put a little love here in my void. He said, it's all in your head. And I said, so is everything, but he didn't get it. So what I like about this lady is like kind of like when you're looking at her at the periphery, you could be like, I don't know, man, this lady kind of too serious or it's kind of something wrong with that lady. But like it's so much humor. I don't know how I'm supposed to interpret what's going on here, but she's a little character.
Yeah.
I thought he was a man, but he was just a little boy. And it's like, woo, man, are you strong enough to come back to this? I like that where it's like, hey, I thought it was a bird, but it was just a paper bag. I thought he was a man, but he was just a little boy. Hunger hurts, and I want him so bad, oh, it kills, because I know I'm a mess he don't want to clean up. I got to fold because these hands are too shaky to hold. Hunger hurts, but starving works when it costs too much to love. Cause hurts, but I want him so bad, oh, it kills, because I know I'm a mess he don't want to clean up. I got to fold because these hands are just too shaky to hold. Hunger hurts, but starving works me when it costs too much to love. Hunger hurts, but I want him so bad, oh, it kills, because I know I'm a mess he don't want to clean up. I got to fold because these hands are just too shaky to hold. Hunger hurts, but starving, it works when it costs too much to love. Wow, that's... Whew. Yeah. That's what I call... You might hear me say this a couple of times as we go on with... on the record jams. I call this, she put her last will and testament on this one.
Yeah, she did.
She put her ankle in it. I don't know what else she could have done to make this a better record.
It's really a good record. It's funny. The video is very odd and a lot of imagery in that as well. But it's just, I'm a sucker for relationship records too. I'm a sucker for a lot of things. I like music. And but if you give me a relationship record, even if it's a breakup record like this, it's funny to listen how many people interpret breakups, right? A lot of times we get those one-dimensional, the problem is clearly the other person. I'm this great person that's the most easiest, wonderfulest thing to love ever, and you couldn't figure it out, so the problem's clearly you. And I think I enjoy it more when artists explore their part in the breakup as well. And this song does a lot of that. While, yeah, she took her shots, but she also called herself out too. So it's really interesting. And again, you talk about that vulnerability. Like she really left herself vulnerable on this song.
It said that she was nominated for Best Female Rock Vocal Performance because, yeah, it's a lot of leading lady energy in this. When you listen to the recording in the car, she's up front. And the music is very interesting because sometimes I get lost in just listening to the music. But like her voice is like front and center. And of course, you know, she's a vocalist plus a brilliant lyricist. So you would want to do that. And it sounds like a one take Charlie to me because nothing in this is like, oh man, this sounds like perfection. Because it sounds like, and the music takes you on a journey and she's going on a journey. And unless they just did some brilliant studio wizardry, it really did come off like you're listening to a live performance.
I could believe that. And then her live performance isn't like note for note 100% the same as the record. And sometimes that goes really sideways when you have artists try to do what I call getting cute when you get live. And like, don't get like sing the song, folks. Don't get too cute now. But like when you have this type of talent, and again, when you talk about that writing prowess and you meaning all this stuff, like these songs mean something to you. Okay, you can go a little bit off note, a little bit off script because you're delivering the lyric. And yeah, the live performances I saw of this get that point across really well. Like she meant this stuff.
Yeah, it's very interesting where it's like, hey, with these last relationships, I felt like I was a mess. And then, hey, maybe I met this next one and they were able to weather the storm. And I didn't feel like I was a mess at all. I think that's where that, I thought he was a man, but he was just a little boy. Maybe that's where that comes in. But the producer, John Brion, we were talking about like, oh yeah, we know him because this is Fiona Apple's sophomore effort. We know the producer, John Brion, because he was on Kanye West's sophomore effort with college registration. Was it college registration?
Late registration, yeah.
Late registration. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, it says a lot about how smart Kanye is. I always talk about resources, right? When you talk about high level artists or artists who are on these big labels, especially in the last, let's say 20 to 25 years. Like when you have resources, sure, you can bring Pharrell in. You probably should. If he likes you, he'll give you something good. But like when you deal with these musicians and you get like what I would call almost like these maestros and conductors to come in and listen to your work and flesh things out, like that's a sign of an artist that's not just trying to make some jams. That's an artist that's not just trying to make some hits. Like that's a person that generally understands like the semi-recent history of music and what it takes to really get some long-lasting, powerful work done. Like you don't have to be singing "We Are the World" to get something accomplished, right? Like there's a lot of different ways to skin that cat, but the main event is getting talent around you, getting people to say, not like this. What about that? Do you want to try this? Why don't you take those drums out right there? Why don't you add this in on that? And so my thought on that is that it's a credit to everybody involved that Late Registration came out the way it did. And I know John Bryan's name came up a lot during the making of that album. And then when the album came out, he was getting a lot of credit for fleshing things out.
Yeah, I can see like what his contributions could be with this album where, like, okay, I hear the bare bones and the acoustics of what you're doing here. And now I think we could probably put like an essence and a soul around the journey. Like a lot of this music is going, because it's moody. When you listen to this album, it's moody. It feels like you should hear it in the wintertime. And I think it works. Like, I think the second album, this When the Pond Falls, it's amazing. I think this is a great record. And I think if someone was like, man, look, I don't have time, and give me 5 songs real quick, let me just listen to her, see, what I can do with this, I would definitely put this this paper bag on the starter kit.
Right. And really, that whole album, though, is like you said, it is moody, but it goes, and it's well put together, and it's another credit to John, too, as well. Whatever amount of work he did on it, and I know he spent a lot of time trying to get her back in the studio after this album, so he's been a part of what she's been doing, so I appreciate him for sure.
Shaniqua said I had potential. That's on Fetch the Bolt Cutters, her latest album that came out in the year 2000. It got a lot of fanfare and a lot of critics wrote positive things about it. It came out during the height of the pandemic where things were shut down, but it made some noise. But I'm sorry, Shamika said I had potential.
Yeah, 2020, right? It was April of 2020?
Yeah, 2020. Yeah. April of 2020, yeah.
That was not a good time.
It was not a good time. But that album was good too, and it's like, man, she still got the fight. And I'm like, man, this isn't just someone from the 90s, early 2000s just released something because I think I should release something. It's like, no, this person still got stuff to say and doing interesting things with music, and powerful. Like, that's another thing with this lady. She's really powerful, and if you're not ready, you can't just hit play and go like, I'm gonna let this wash over me. You gotta really be like ready for like, I'm about to put this on. Like, when you put leather pants on, you can't just go like, oh, I just got leather pants on. Like, you gotta be wearing leather pants, and you can't just put that on and act like, oh, I don't know I'm wearing this. Like, you're wearing it. So like with this Fiona Apple album, or like her music in general, I mean, maybe some people could play it and just be jamming in the background, but it's like, to me, I think it takes it's heavy lifting, in a fun way, in a great way. But I just think like, man, am I just mentally prepared for this? And I don't like people usually covering the Beatles. She covered Across the Universe, and I think is awesome.
Yep. Because, she's got enough respect for anything prior because of the type of artist that she is, that she wouldn't be the type that would just jump in there and mess it over. She'd have respect for what she's trying to do, and she's got the talent to deliver, right?
Shamika said I had potential.
Shamika was right.
Shamika was right. She was right. So yeah, that's what I put on the record. Fiona Apple's Paper Bag. Guys, you gotta listen to this. It's like 3 minutes, 50 seconds.
Watch the video
Listen to it on the car. Yeah, watch the video. I realized I watched the video today, and I'm like, have I ever seen this in its entirety? Because I'm like, I don't think I ever watched this, or maybe I watched it once and never revisited it.
Yep.
Again, because I think there's sometimes where I'm just straight up scared of this album because it's so powerful. But now I can return to it and listen to it and enjoy it. I'm strong enough to do it, but like back then, I'm like, I think I'll wait for the wintertime when I'm doing a big cleanup, blast a sucker. And I've never seen her live. I can't believe it.
Huh. But has she had times where she wasn't performing live on a regular basis, though? She was kind of harder to get to, right?
Yeah. I think, like, if you didn't catch her this time, maybe it might be another 5 years or something.
I'm guessing she's a hell of a live show, too.
Yeah. Yeah. Fiona Apple. So, hey, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to find out what Arthur has put on the record.
All right.
To confront the ultimate killers, I must construct the ultimate alias.
Hey, who is that lady? I think she could fly.
To combat the murderers who destroy my family, crush my own life on their way to consuming everything, I must become a greater, more fearsome destroyer.
No! Hey man, somebody killed this lady.
To track down the animals who prey on the innocent, I must stalk them first. I am no longer their quarry. I am the huntress.
You can listen to the Huntress Podcast online at thehuntress.podcast.com, at Apple Podcasts, and again, this shares a feed with the Bad Girl Cassandra Cain podcast. Cheers.
Hello and welcome back to On the Record Jams. This is episode 7. Arthur and AJ are here with you, the uncles that America deserves. Arthur, what are you putting on the record?
I'm going to put Kendrick Lamar's album on the record. No, just playing. I've listened to it enough to put it on the record, but not this time. I'll come back to it some other time. What I put on the record this time is the Brothers Johnson, Strawberry Letter 23. This is a cover from Sugar Otis. The Brothers Johnson version came out in 1977. So that's what's going on the record today. I sent you this video, which I hadn't seen that video until recently. So a 1977 music video is always interesting to me. What did you think of that video before I get into the song?
Okay, so basically, I'm always just hitting play and driving in the car. Today, I was able to really look at it, and when I was reading the comments, there were so many people that said, after all these years, I never knew there was a video for it.
Right, and I think I didn't either. So when I was going to listen to it, you know, you're trying to get to your music, and I was like, you know what, let me just go look and see. Was there like a live performance? Because you've got me in the habit of doing that. Like, let me hear what the live performance sounds like too.
Oh, it's incredible.
And I was like, no, this is a video. What is this?
Oh, yeah. Hey, they're sitting there, and hey, it's these extravagant locations. Because at first I was like, oh, are they in the Bay Area? Then I started seeing the background, like, wait a minute, no, they're like not in the U.S., right?
Yeah, they went all in on that. I mean, this also gives me an excuse to talk a little bit about Quincy Jones and some of the stuff he did in the 70s before, because, you know, he was doing stuff before Michael Jackson. That's the thing that a lot of people don't know. He existed before that, and he was almost like a kind of like a jazz guy in the 70s, and he sang himself, Quincy Jones. And so I always find it interesting when those type of maestro characters, when they start creating their own acts that they produce, and their session musicians and the people who end up coming up through them. And you just end up with all these wild names, especially when you're dealing with somebody of the status of a Quincy Jones, like the names of people that had something to do with him and went on and did their own thing is really big. But one of the names on there is the Brothers Johnson. So it gave me an excuse to kind of, at least we'll see how much of that we end up touching on. But yeah, this is a good one. I like this one a lot.
Can you talk about the bass player?
So, all right. Yeah. Louis Johnson. So the Brothers Johnson, there was more than two of the brothers, but by the time they got to this point, like late 70s, I think their first album with Quincy was 1976, and this is on the second album. So it was just the two brothers. So it was George and Louis Johnson, and George was more of the lead vocalist, and Louis was the guitar player and the bass guitar player. So you hear some of this. That's something you notice on Strawberry Letter 23 for sure. That bass is coming in hard, and there's a lot of really good bass playing happening on this song and on Brothers Johnson songs in general. But yeah, Louis Johnson, I guess the spoiler alert is that this duo didn't stay together making albums for a really long time. Like it was, you know, let's say something like 6 or 7 albums over about that same amount of time. And then musically, the two brothers wanted to do different things. And so George Johnson went off and did his own thing, and Louis did the same thing. But the thing is, Louis is like, they were both plugged into that Quincy Jones universe. So Louis Johnson was a heavily sought after bass player. And guess what he ended up doing? He ended up playing bass on a lot of the key Michael Jackson albums, like the Off the Wall and Thriller. And so he's there. He's with George Benson. He's with Herb Albert. he's like he's around and he's well thought of as a bass player, like a short list. Like musicians love this guy, and I think it's interesting when you think about how the 60s and 70s and 80s really worked, but really the 70s, where you get all these acts that just kind of get their chance after being in the background helping other people. And then they end up making, let's say, 3 to 5 barbecue jams that you know, and then they kind of break up and do their own thing. And as a kid, you're not going to know Louis Johnson is the guy playing the guitar on Wanna Be Starting Something. Like, you're not going to know that. But then later on, and since we've all gotten the internet now, it's like, okay, you can look around long enough and eventually this information will come into you. And you're like, wait, so the dude from Brothers Johnson is the guy playing guitar on all these ridiculous, amazing songs with great bass lines? Sweet. And so that's another excuse to kind of bring these guys up as well, because it's not like they just had their songs. They kept contributed to a lot of other people's songs as well.
Because this music, it sounds like super group stuff. This is the definition of a good record, because there's so much going on. We got bass lines that you can groove to, a guitar solo in the video. The guitar solo is going with a sunset.
Yeah.
I mean, they were doing a lot in this video where it's like, hey, we're in this location. We're going to use the heck out of it, right?
Right. We're going to use the heck out of it. And like, we're going to take our shot. Like, we're going to know we're probably not going to get 10 albums to hit. Like, so we're going to have hits now. We're working with Quincy Jones. This is a good deal. We're getting our shot to be front and center after being in the background. It's funny because one of the brothers was dating like a family member of the Otis family. So Sugar Otis. And Sugar Otis is the original artist for this song. And that's how they heard the original song, Strawberry Letter 23. And they decided to cover it. And it's funny, I talked so much in our episodes so far about people doing covers almost like as a way to stick it to some other artist, or there's some kind of racial tension behind it. But in this case, it was like there's also a thing. It's just hey, man, we like this song and we want to do justice to it by producing it again and like adding it to what we're doing. So Strawberry Letter 23 was it was a love cover, what I would call it. It was an homage cover. And so and you know, funny enough, the Sugar Otis version of this song is different. And it's a good time too. So I really like I like both of these songs. I can listen to them back to back and enjoy myself. And they feel kind of different because the vocals are so different.
You have harmonies and just background vocals. This is like the type of music I like, right? Yeah. And again, you're going on a journey. Just the whole thing. And then when you really want to pay attention to the lyrics, you're like, man, there's a lot of good stuff going on here. So I was definitely like, when I went on YouTube to look it up and there was a live version, I was like, oh, let me check this out, because it seems like, man, this is really complicated. And bam, I think the live version sounds even better.
Yeah, because you get to see some of how serious the instrumentation was. And like you said, it's yes. Packed, it's loaded. There's a lot of people going for theirs on this. It's funny enough, and I talk about that session musician thing, where when you have, I keep calling it maestros, like a Quincy Jones is trying to create a record. He doesn't know if it's going to be a hit or not. He doesn't know if it's going to be a single. He doesn't know if we're going to make a weird video standing by water. Like, they don't know. He's like, I'm just trying to make the best 7 to 10 songs I can make and put it on an album. And so you get that fiddling stuff that you hear about with artists, where it's like, hey, man, we were trying to get this part right and we couldn't get it right. And it's a part on this song at the end. I don't know whether you want to call it like a bridge or a vamp out, where you get the guitar piece, like the like that guitar piece apparently is very difficult to play. And so the Brothers Johnsons were catching all sorts of heck trying to get that part. And that part is in the Sugar Otis version too. And they were like, man, we kind of can't get this to sound the way we want it to sound. And there's like frustration over the course of days. And so what Quincy Jones does, because he's Quincy Jones, is he just calls one of his session guys and he's like, I know I have a guy that can play this the way we want it to be played. Don't worry about it. I'm going to call him up. So who he calls up is Lee Ritenour, who is a kind of a well-known session guitar player from the 70s that went on in the 80s to have his own albums. And when I hear that name, I think of the song Is It You? And if people don't know Is It You, you need to know Is It You, because it's a yacht rock classic. But before that, yeah, he snuck in and helped the Brothers Johnson get that guitar part right on this song. So I love hearing little stories like that, because you're talking about killer musicians not being happy with something that they're doing and somebody having to come in and help them clean it up and work it out. Kind of like what happened with John Bryan, right? Like John Bryan doing this for Fiona and doing the same thing with Kanye. Like, you can imagine a guy like Kanye thinking, man, I'm Kanye West, and all the stuff that comes with that. But man, I think I need some help on this. Like, I need to get somebody else in here to hear this. Like, these drums don't sound right. Or man, I don't know if my vocals are laid in here right. Or man, I'm trying to make this sound like this. You know who I need to get with? I need to get with the dude that did Fiona Apple's second album. I need to do that. I need to see if he'll call me back. Because, we're famous enough. We got enough money, right? Like, yeah, I'm already over budget. Why don't I go over budget and make a better album? Well, it's like the 70s, it seemed like that we're just going to stay till we get it right thing was just how you made music.
So this is definitely, I don't know if they're all living in LA or whatever, and it's straight word of mouth. Like, oh man, you need a bass player, call the Brothers Johnson folks. Oh, you need this keyboard to see if you can get, because the internet's not around. And this is also, I want to talk about, we've talked about regionalism before with hip hop. And with that, even though the regionalism was there, I think you still knew about the other artists, and you could just choose to ignore them. Where the 50s, 60s, and I would think in the 70s, it's a situation where this is a huge hit in the tri-state area, and no one else around the country will never hear about it. Or this was a doo-wop group in Washington, D.C., and no one else would hear about it. Because I remember, like, with RZA, After the Laughter, when I heard like where that music originally came from, and I played it for my parents, they're like, we never heard that in our life. So it's like that regionalism, that was strong. So my mind was blown where I was like, well, I've heard this song before, this by the Brothers Johnson. And I was just very surprised when these folks, they were saying like, hey, I jam this music all the time. I was never aware that there was a video for it, because that was during the time where I think now, like a 15-year-old, if they were jamming a song, maybe they would look up if there was a video for it. But I wonder how many of them would be jamming a modern day song. Like, I play this all the time, and I'm unaware that there's a video for it.
I think that happens more than you would want to believe, because remember, like we talked about me having a 16-year-old, just speaking, obviously it's one 16-year-old out of all of them, but the thing I see is it's just playlist. They like a song, they add it to their magical master playlist, and then they play that master playlist. And if you can't make it onto that master playlist, you might not get played. And the way that stuff gets on there is, you bump into a song because you're in the car and you hear it on the radio. You keep hearing it at a school dance. Some friend says, do you know about such and such? You say, who is such and such? And they say, you need to listen to this. And then you kind of get put on. Some of that stuff is kind of going back to a retro place. And then the kids that are a little bit more into it, okay, maybe they go explore different albums and different things. But a lot of times it's the technology is better, but the approach is almost the same. Like, if it doesn't come into your sphere of existence, you're not going to know about it.
Yeah, it's interesting that it would be different if this was like, okay, we did this video in the 70s, and we're kind of just standing here at this dance hall performing. But I mean, like we said, they're doing a guitar solo, and the sun's reflection is reflecting off of the guitar strap. So it's like, man, you guys did all of that, and maybe it still didn't get played on the hot box or whatever like people had back then. Because I'm thinking more of we couldn't ship it to them, or they would only play this on cable, and it's 1970s. Not everyone has cable. So I'm just kind of thinking of all the ways where how this didn't get shown.
Well, right, because this would have been before. It's almost like you look at videos is before Thriller and Purple Rain and after Thriller and Purple Rain, because it's like that early 80s. Like there's videos for songs even starting like as early as like the 70s, like the early 70s. It just wasn't a requirement though. Some artists were like, I'm not making a video. I don't need a video. If you want to see me sing it, then come watch me perform. I'll sing it there. But once you get to like 75 and later, certain artists, depending on who they were with, it was like, hey man, you need to make at least one video. I don't care if it's weird. And obviously at the time they didn't know these videos were weird. But once you see, like by the mid 80s, when we were kids and MTV, and you talk about getting access to cable and get into a situation where 2 or 3 channels are playing videos at least, a few hours a day. And you're like, okay, like you can kind of understand how you need to make a video now, because there's bigger budgets. They're figuring it out. The cameras are better. There's more than one camera. And it's like the editing is easier and better and all that, because people are putting up money to make these doggone videos. I think you were barely seeing the beginning of that in the late 70s. So that's how it makes sense. Like, I'm going to guess none of our parents have seen this Strawberry Letter 23 video. Like, I would assume they did not.
What is Strawberry Letter 23?
So this is Shuggie Otis's song, right? So the general story is that there's a love interest of some kind, and they write letters to each other and they number them. The dispute, of course, is the chorus is a present from you, Strawberry Letter 22. The music plays, I sit in for a few. And it's like, well, wait. The name of the song, Strawberry Letter 23, what are we doing here? You can't count or what? But basically the idea is that the song is the response to the letter, i.e. the next letter in the set of letters.
I love it.
It's beautiful. It's nerdy stuff. I love it. I love Shuggie for coming up with that. Shuggie's got songs too, man. That's another artist we need to find a way to dig into some other time. But yeah, he's got some jams, man. But the Brothers Johnson, you think now 71 to 77, that's not that long of a time, but it's a completely different era. But one of the guys in Brothers Johnson allegedly got married to this, like had this playing during his wedding. So in other words, like when I say it was a love cover or homage cover, I mean it. Like they really liked this song. And so the idea was like, man, we love this guy. We want to bring him into the Quincy Jones fray. It didn't work out because Shuggie ultimately didn't join up with Quincy Jones and them. But even still, they were like, hey, we're covering this song because we gotta put this out again. And another funny thing about, like, again, these maestro characters. So I put RZA in that thing. I'm not comparing Quincy Jones and RZA or putting them on a list together. But when I think about these people that kind of bring a bunch of folks together and do all of those types of things, I always kind of find it funny, some of the vocalists they pick. Because sometimes they don't pick the gymnastics best singer in the church singer. Sometimes they go for somebody that's got a certain type of tone that they like. And I think with the Brothers Johnson, like that's what happened in this case too, because they knew, like George Johnson, his voice, like in my mind, there's not a lot of singers that sound like him, but he just sound like your cool ass uncle that can sing. And he's killing these deliveries. And maybe if he sings it live, it doesn't hold up the same level. Cause again, he's probably not a gymnastics I was the best singer at my school for 5 years. Like, he wasn't that type of singer, but he was just smooth and cool, and he was expressive. Like, he could emote with his vocals. So, like, if you were to listen to, like, if I say here's 10 Brothers Johnson songs, you're gonna hear the instrumentation is gonna be crazy, the bass lines are gonna be beautiful, and the vocal deliveries are gonna be like, oh yeah, I like this is smooth, like this is well handled. Like, I don't know why this guy wasn't a bigger deal or whatever, but we like it's really likable music. So whether you want to call that it's just a jam or whatever, hey, the world needs just a jam sometimes too. Everything doesn't need mountains of subtext, and this is coming from me. Like, sometimes you need to throw on something that's just jamming, and this is that for sure.
And that's a good record.
It really is, man. Feel sunshine, sparkle, pink and blue. Playgrounds will laugh if you try to ask if it's cool. If you arrive and don't see me, I'm gonna be with my baby. I'm free. Flying in her arms over the sea. That's good writing right there.
Check this out. Hello, my love. I heard a kiss from you. Red magic satin playing near too. All through the morning rain I gaze. The sun doesn't shine. Rainbows and waterfalls run through my mind. In the garden I see west purple shower bells and tea. Orange birds and river cousins. Dressed in green, pretty music I hear. So happy and loud, blue flowers echo from a cherry cloud.
Yeah, you're not playing around when you wrote that.
No.
That's, somebody knew what they were doing when they wrote that. So Sugar was on it. And again, it's so cool that somebody would hear that and then want to cover it again, because originally it wasn't a colossal hit. It was the biggest hit version of it is the Brothers Johnson version. So I know for me as a kid, because you talk about visibility and what you hear and what you don't hear. Well, I can confess on record here, I can put it on the record that the version I heard first was the Brothers Johnson version. And I heard the Sugar version like multiple years later, like in my early 20s during my, I used to call it my Master of Funk music exploration time. Like, just once music became more available, like I'm grabbing albums. I started off grabbing greatest hits because that's what I could afford, man. And then once music became more available, you start getting the streaming services. I was like, let me just run through this whole album. In some kind of way, through that exploration, I bumped into Sugar Otis. And I just heard the song, and I'm like, who is this singing the Brothers Johnson song? Let me find out who this is still in the song. And then, of course, I do the research, and I'm like, oh, this is Sugar's song. Okay, got it. Okay, well, that's crazy. When did that come out? Okay, they covered it right after that? Oh, okay, yeah. That was still happening in the 70s? Oh, okay. Then understanding who Sugar Otis was and who his dad was, and I mean, obviously for our age, knowing Sugar's dad is just like somebody would have had to tell you or you wouldn't have known. Or even just the understanding how some of these people link up, like some of the stuff we've gone over, how the Brothers Johnson are with Quincy Jones in the late 70s. Michael Jackson goes and taps Quincy Jones to make Off the Wall. It goes great, but not as great as Mike wants to have it go. So they come back and run it back and make Thriller. And we all know how that one went. And in the background, one of the brothers from Brothers Johnson is back there playing the music. And it's like all this stuff connects. And I know you made a point before about like a guy like Quincy Jones, when you come in as a session musician and you play things the way he wants you to play it, you're going to make it back into the room if you want to be there, right? Because you're going to get called up. And like you said, it wasn't the internet. It was like word of mouth. Like, hey, man, we need somebody to play this part the way we want them to play it. We don't want to be up here all night trying to get it right. Hey, call him, because I know he's a bang-up guitar player. I know he's a bang-up bass guitarist. Hey, we need a guy to play the keys on this. Oh, yeah, we got a key guy for this. Hey, man, we're trying to figure out these lyrics. Man, we got about half a song written. Like, it's almost a hit, but we need somebody to go ahead and put the other last half on this to make this an all-the-way hit. Like that composition, that production, executive producing, whatever you want to call it, like that that process and that community of music, like, man, that's really fun to see that work out. And when you look back now and see all the information of who was in the room when some of these songs are getting made, it's like, okay, it makes sense. I think as a kid and even as a young adult, I think I used to fall for it a lot, like thinking that some of these great artists was just sitting in a room by themselves in the dark, dreaming up all this ridiculous, amazing stuff. And every now and then that's the case, but a lot of times there's collaboration. There's people, these songs float around like half finished for months. And then somebody comes in and says, man, you need to add this. No, man, you know what? You worried about adding all this stuff in? You need to take some stuff out. Like, yeah, take it out. Let's hear what it sounds like when you take it out. And then you take it out and everybody looks at each other like, oh, we took the flutes out. That's all we needed the whole time. This song is a hit now. And it's just like, I really get interested in that, especially, again, when you think about how many talented people ended up being involved in some of these records, especially in the 70s.
It's interesting that you mentioned how Quincy Jones, where when he's putting stuff together, what he's extracting out, it isn't things that are the obvious. And then when you hear the final product, you're like, oh, yeah, of course. But he had to have the vision to even see that, because on paper or when you're just kind of spitballing, maybe it didn't seem so, of course.
Right. Maybe it didn't seem so, of course. And then also that challenge of when you're struggling as an artist to try to put together the big massive jam or the hit or whatever, and you're trying to sound like you're already caught up in what you're trying to sound like. So whether it is you're trying to make the best dance album, or you're trying to, oh, people funky now? Oh, okay, I'm finna get funky too now. You gonna find, oh, you think you got the funk? We got the real funk over here. And it's like you just start doing all of that type of stuff. Or like, you think you're the best vocalist? Oh, watch these vocal gymnastics I got. I'm finna do these notes where they don't need to be notes. I'm gonna do all these church runs. I'm gonna do, like, I'm the singer here. And I think sometimes you need those Quincy Jones people to come in and be like, hey, man, I was on the scene with Frank Sinatra. I know what real singing is. And what you're doing is cute, but let me help you out. And like really taking control of the wheel and getting all those egos and those like, the Phil Jackson thing, the Pat Riley thing, like getting everybody together and getting the most out of everybody. Like, man, that's not, I think we all know that's not easy to do, man. It's hard to be a commissioner of a fantasy league. Like, trying to get people together in a room and create something that sounds really, really good, and it sounds as good as it can be, and you can not lose the plot of what the song is supposed to be. Because again, sometimes you're trying to get a mood across. Sometimes you're just trying to make a jam that's going to come on and people are going to feel good about it, and they're going to play it when they want to feel good. And yeah, it's harder. I think sometimes people don't give enough credit to successful pop hit songs.
Yeah. That it took a lot to get this to work. Yeah. I think a good example of watching someone managing a lot of talent, and whereas it's not so obvious or maybe a big time risk, the movie Saturday Night, it's about the final hours leading up to the first episode of Saturday Night Live.
Oh.
And seeing Lorne Michaels trying to manage all these fireballs. It was like herding cats. And they did a really good job of showing like how frenetic and insane that was in the 70s.
Yeah, I can bet.
Yeah, so I'm always interested in that too. I like that you mentioned like the RZA, where these people, they're in his neighborhood, but they're different avatars. So they don't all sound the same. Like, it's not a group where it's like, they're from the same neighborhood. They pretty much sound the same. Like, they're coming from different vantage points. And he was able to see, like, but what if we put that together? This could probably be a thing. So I do like that show running, that management, pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, maybe we can talk about that next time. Maybe Maybe one of us can do a Wu-Tang song and we can go all in on about how great the RZA is to get all those cats herded together for as long as he did.
Yeah. Final thoughts about Brothers Johnson, Strawberry Letter number 23.
I thought about doing I'll Be Good to You as well, because a lot of the same points get across. It's not a cover of a Sugar Otis song, but just the instrumentation of it, the coolness of the lead vocal and how it's laid into everything, the bass playing, and just you can hear like the 70s Quincy Jones of it, like when those choruses come and those hooks, like they're always catchy and well delivered. And usually, funny enough, it seems like that's where a lot of times the best singers were in a Quincy Jones production, is in the hooks. Because that's when a lot of times you might get the Shaka Khans, you might get the Michael Jackson doing his notorious sneaking in the background, being uncredited on songs. Like, that's where you get some of that. One more thing about Quincy Jones before we close out is Stevie Wonder has a song on Talking Book called You Got It Bad, Girl. And I came across a version of that is on a Quincy Jones album. And I'm so used to Quincy Jones being the maestro, like commanding all these different singers and people. It blew my mind to find out that was him singing on the Quincy Jones version of the song. So you might want to check that out one time. Like it's a Stevie Wonder. It's ultimately a Stevie Wonder song, but it was also recorded and put down on a Quincy Jones album too. So Quincy was sneaking around singing too, because it wasn't enough that he eventually went on to be at the head of basically the most successful pop album ever, you know.
I will check that out. 1973, You Got It Bad, Girl, Quincy Jones. Guys, let us know what you think. You can reach us at ontherecordjams@gmail.com. Where's some other places they can reach us, Arthur?
So you got the Gmail, you got at On The Records Jam on X, you got On The Records Jam on Facebook. I think we need to work on a couple other places where people can find us too. 'Cause I think sometimes we come into a lot of information, and I'm sure there's times where we could stand to be corrected or have a couple blanks filled in. And I would love to hear that. And I know people love to give you the well actually every now and then. And I'll take a well actually if it gives me more information about music. Because again, music is a good time if you let it be.
And we're on YouTube. I'll put that in show links. And I'm on Bluesky, Houston, HUESTONE. 44.bsky.social. Again, I'll put that in the show notes. And like Arthur was saying, like, hey, this conversation isn't over. If anything, Strawberry Letter 23 and Brown Bag, Paper Bag, this conversation has just begun again. So yeah, let us know what we missed, what we may have gotten wrong, or your interpretation. We'd love to hear it. And again, like what Arthur keep mentioning, if you have some more context, let us know. Yeah, hit us up on the Record Jams. Guys, keep jamming and keep your lamplight trimmed and burning.
Yes, and yes, say it again. Keep jamming.